Hello everyone, here is Max speaking, and I want to give you today the first video about how to use the Do-Right automations. To get started, please download the file on the GitHub link I posted in this article, and I have done this already here. And I would like to ask you to extract the files, and then we already are pretty much ready to go. So this application consists of two executables. One of them is the CMD, so this is the command line, and the second one is the UI itself. In this video or this series of videos, I'm gonna focus on the UI, and on the second part I will also go in more details about the command line tool. So once you open the UI, there is a few things you can set up. So first of all is the username and password, which is also in the prerequisites. Means this is your username and the password where you are able to manage your Do-Right instance. Means you can start maps, stop maps, create new map versions, for examples. What happens whenever you run the application is it's logging in through Selenium Edge WebDriver and logs in with these credentials by simulating typing in these credentials in order to retrieve an authentication token, and in the backend everything else what happens usually manually will happen through this token which got retrieved in that process. Now, the second setting, or the third setting to be precise, is the FNO environment URL. You can put here a list of environments, so whenever you have the environment and you are working, for example, on multiple ones, you don't need to always copy and paste it fresh into the application. You can simply say, okay, add to the list, and then it will add it into the environment list on the right side. Same as if you don't need this anymore, you can also remove it, then it disappears from here and you can add it straight away again. Another feature is the direct Do-Right page. Here you will find a link which will bring you directly to the Do-Right page. That means you do not need to go through FNO, data management, and Do-Right anymore. You can access the backend page directly. As you can see here, I click on the link and the UI opens with all the settings what you have done previously. With this, you are already pretty much set with going through into the next settings. So the next parameter is applying the solutions. This determines whether you want to apply the solutions during this run or not. Where the solutions are specified, I come in a little moment. The ADO wiki upload determines if you want to extract the maps, what you have behind the environment specified above, exported into an ADO wiki. Means this will save all the map configurations into the Wikipedia, into the wiki of your DevOps. We can have a little look at it later, and we can also execute the upload for this. The next setting is the run mode. This determines how you will run these applications. There's different parts of this. So you have deploy maps, deploy and initial sync, which are very similar, but with only one different thing what happens. Deploying the maps means it will determine, based on your configuration, the maps where it goes through. It, depending on the versions, what you set in your configuration, it will check what's the current version applied, and is there a higher version or a different version what you want to apply to, and then it will stop the maps, it will apply the new version, it will refresh tables, it will apply the integration keys, and then it will start the map in the new version back again. So that would be happening when you deploy a new solution into your upper environment. Now, the only difference between those two is deploying the maps will not trigger any initial sync. Only if you select the second option, it will also trigger the initial sync at the end of deploying maps. Means it's first trying to deploy the maps and then it runs the initial sync if you select this option. Next option is starting the maps. Means it will start all the maps in your configuration. Stopping the maps, it will stop all the maps in your configuration. Pausing the maps, it will pause all of them which are in your configuration. The last point, which is also very important, is exporting configuration. Means you can do an entire copy, or I would say a backup of your current configuration and your current setup on the current environment. And this is where we are going to start with the second video to export the configuration. But first of all, I want to go a little bit deeper into the configuration itself. The entire application runs on configuration files. You will find here a list of configuration files in your folder. You can add multiple configuration files and run against different configuration files. Let's have a look at the settings and how they are built up. Let's expand this a little bit. So the first settings are the application settings. If you have any detailed questions in the GitHub on the wiki, you will also find a detailed description for each field. I will go for this one now through the most basic ones. So I will skip the application settings because they are not essential for the first initial setup. They are already set in the state where it's good to run. Now the second setting is the ADO wiki upload settings, which I will also cover on a later stage, how to set them up, but these are mainly used if you want to upload your maps, for example, documentation purposes, into your Azure DevOps wiki. The solutions. These are the solutions which are applied on the environment. Whenever we export a configuration, it will take all the solutions which are currently installed. These ones you will find, or the name, what you would need to enter here. If we go back to the environment and you go to apply solution, you will get a list of solutions. And you need the name column for this, and not the display name, because it needs to be the unique name you need to enter here. Comparing this, it will also match with my current environment. So if you have a solution you do not want to apply, you can simply select them and then remove them. Then we come further down to the groups. In the groups itself, you can assign the groups to the maps further down, and in the groups there are settings mainly for initial sync. So in the group itself you define if the initial sync should happen or not. Now again, this is only triggered when you select in the run mode deploy maps and initial sync. If you just select deploy maps, it will not run any initial sync. So here you can create multiple groups depending on your needs. You might want to run initial sync for a certain amount of maps and you do not want to run an initial sync for other maps. So in this case, you could, for example, create a second group and set initial sync to false, and then assign this group in the map section to all the maps you don't want to run initial sync. And then it will also not run the initial sync, even you selected the run mode, deploy maps, and initial sync. The retry field determines if a retry should happen when you have self-referencing records during initial sync. Means a common scenario is customers and invoice accounts. When the customer is synced before the invoice account, it will throw you an error that it cannot look up the invoice account with the values. The application is able to determine that it is a self-referencing record, and it will then trigger the initial sync immediately after again until the record count is not decreasing anymore, like the failed record count, or it fully resolves itself. The target status determines, so this is independent of initial sync setting. This is the only setting of it. This will determine if you deploy the maps, what will be your, or what is your desired target status. You can set up running, stopped, or keep. If you set it to running, regardless if the map was in stopped state before you started the script, it will put it into running state. If you say here you put it in stopped state, it will keep the map in a stopped state. In this case, it would be like you deployed a new map and you want to deploy it and have the latest versions, but you do not want to have it running. In this case, you could also create a second group for these and have a target status stopped, and for all the other ones you have it running. If you select keep as a target status, it will just keep the status as of it was before you run the script. So if it was running before, it puts it back in running state. If it was stopped, it keeps it in stopped state. The exception handling is mainly also for the initial sync, and there is multiple settings. Ignore will ignore the errors and continues with the next map on initial sync. Skip, regardless of errors, it will skip initial sync and puts the map into running state. And stop, whenever an error occurs on one map, it will stop the entire process. Now for initial sync itself, it will not run in parallel, it will apply the maps one by one in sequence, and however they are shown in the grid below here. So from top to bottom. Which brings us also into the next section already, into the map configurations or map configs. Here you will see all the maps which are supposed to be deployed or applied. And there's also multiple settings. So the map name itself is the technical map name in the backend. The version you can specify either latest, or you can also specify the exact version you want to deploy. In case of a production deployment, for example, you want to have the exact version. The group refers to the group above. It can be empty. The author or the publisher will give you the possibility, if you select latest, it gives you the possibility to select the latest version of a specific author. Let's say you have a custom map and it has a same version like the out-of-the-box map. It will select just any of these, let's say 1.000. If you select the author or the publisher in here, you can also add multiple with comma separated. It will then limit the maps to that publisher only. If we have a look in the UI again, the publisher itself is always shown whenever you go in the map version of any map. is always shown here. So in this case, you could now enter Microsoft Dynamics 365 or your custom publisher name. You can comma separate it. The key string represents the integration key, and during the export it will also auto-populate this. And in the last column is the master. This is particular for the initial sync scenario, where you can select the master of when there are conflicts, which system should override as a priority. This is it for the basic high-level overview of the configurations. Let's close this. It will ask you also to save the settings, and then it will override whatever changes I did. Now, after you run this, you always have a log file for each run. In the actions here, you can open the last log file or show the entire log folder. At the bottom here, you also see an output log. Means whatever is being logged is put into the log itself, and also here as an overview in the output log. With the start button, you finally then start the application depending on how it's running or how you selected it, and then you can also forcefully stop it again. Then it's just going to kill the application.